Now, as always, when we ask a question like this, we hear the best, right? We hear the best what diversity can offer. But when we look at the world that we live in, somehow there seems to be a gap between what we see and what we experience. I believe all of you would acknowledge that, right?
Yeah.
From the time I take my elevator in my apartment block and I make my way to my office, there are so many things that could happen in my lived experience here that could be a totally opposite to what we are talking about in the room today. So I'm very curious to know your perspective as to why could there be this gap between our intention or even our appreciation. And this appreciation appears to be very natural. From what I'm hearing from every one of you, it appears to me as if, although I know that I'm with you on this one, that diversity is very natural to us. It is natural because it is as good as saying a law of it being a law of nature. So if that is so, then why is there a gap between what we are talking about in the room and what we are experiencing in life? And maybe I'll ask, may I request Waikit and then we to then share. Waikit and then we. What do you think there's a gap?
I'm reminded of a poem as well, like that in a way there's between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act falls the shadow, right? That somehow between our intention and the execution, there's always that gap, and that's universal. I mean, that's something that has plagued humanity since like the dawn of civilization. So that's not going to go away. But I think a lot of it has to do with our assumptions and how our beliefs, and also how committed we are to ensuring successful translation into reality. So what does that mean in context, right? Now, suppose we were to assume that, say, each of our own individual traditions, right, it already contains the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Now, the moment we assume that and we think of diversity and interfaith dialogue as some kind of PR exercise, then it's not going to work. It's going to be very artificial. It's going to be very superficial as well. But if we really believe to the very core of our being that none of our traditions, no single tradition, no single religious tradition has a complete, absolute monopoly on the truth, that immediately changes your paradigm and your worldview, because then it starts to make sense to even start speaking to others, because then we say, oh, it turns out, say, another tradition has that new perspective of phenomena that I've never before understood or known about, So I think that the mindset is so important, and the assumptions are so important, because it changes the way we act, right? So I mean, and that's why I think that there's something about even the Hindu tradition that's admirable in its plurality. I am saying this because I remember I was reading on South Asian studies back during my uni days. I was quite impressed by that. By the South Asian religious tradition, and we see this in many South Asian contexts, when there's a kind of it's very rare to have any absolutist strain that says, oh, this external influence is forbidden or evil. But no, instead it's incorporated, it's included, and I think that's definitely an impulse that a lot of religious traditions, wherever they are, that we can really learn from.
Yeah, thanks, Waikit. Over to Master Wei. I'd like to hear your perspectives as well.
Yeah, Master Wei.
I think for us, experience is very important. I think many of the Chinese saying or the Taoist writings say that 行无言之教 means we have to really learn it through experience and also the people around us. That's why when people say that we are always talking about diversity, talking about harmony, but how come the fact is that we cannot achieve that? It's just like a teacher teaching 40 students in a class. The teacher may be teaching the same thing, but whatever that the experience from the students, what they gather, what they learn, right? The experiences are all different based on their own background or what. So I believe that although the person may be religious or spiritual, it is still a learning process for them to really appreciate the scriptures, what he had mentioned. Of course, scriptures always guide us. It's always there as a guide for us, how to be a good person. All these are really a compass for us. So, but how can a person really live his life according to the scriptures or according to the tradition. It is really about his own background and experience and the people around him. So that's why we always have a congregation like Taoist priests. We have a lot of gatherings together. We encourage each other through chanting, and we must remind ourselves that while we are preaching all these good values, we ourselves have to really follow and act on it, and really live up to what is expected of us. So it is really a learning journey. So what I've practiced 10 years back and now is really a different experience. It may be due to my work, the people I know, like through interfaith dialogue. The more we engage with one another, the more we really ask ourselves about our faith. So am I really practicing what I've always been sharing? So it's really a constant reminder for us to really do good. So it is always like something that's always in process, that we have to really hope that we can achieve so-called harmony or diversity. Something is always a work in progress. So I feel that if all of us, engage in such dialogues, very frank dialogue, talk about each other's scripture, it really reminds myself of what I really share. To my students, every time I share with my student, it is also a constant reminder for myself to really act on it. That's why Taoism, we always emphasize not only talk, you must really act, like Siu Xing the Xing. You must really walk the talk. Yeah, don't always just talk. Yeah, you must really do it according to the tradition. If not, everything is just talking only lah. I can dream of everything, but nothing will be realized. Yeah.
Yes. The Xiu Xing part is something we have, is very Buddhist as well. Yeah, it's not just reading of the scriptures, it's also to sit and do the meditation. It's painful or it's difficult, but just sit and do it, or service, or charity or whatever. Yeah, really.
Yeah, so the Xing is not the easiest one. It's easy to say, but it's really not that easy to really do it. That's why you see so many people doing the same thing, but not many people excel or really eventually succeed in it. Yeah.
Yes.
Right, I'm very happy to hear these responses, because the response is getting deeper and deeper from Master Wei as well as YK. So we are seeing the illusion of not walking the talk as the gap. All right. So I would like to hear from the rest of you as well. What do you see? Do you see the same thing, or is it something more? Can I hear from perhaps Nelvinder and then Deva? What are your thoughts?
Right. Okay, I agree. Most of us are not walking the talk, but I would still come down to the education part, understanding as youngsters. You see, if we start educating them, the young ones, when we educate them, they will slowly start thinking, hey, this can be done, this can be. It actually opens up their context and knowledge towards other religion. Then they can embrace. When they embrace, it might be small steps, but these small steps, awareness at a young age, could make a lot of difference when they grow older and they start speaking and sharing their knowledge. For when it comes to walking the talk, we can see, but with people not walking the talk, just preaching, it's not going to make any difference, because at the end of the day, if I'm a student, why must I preach? These are the questions which I'm going to pose. I don't have this knowledge. I wasn't embarked in this knowledge. My Sikh didn't say this. My this religion didn't say that. So why should I do? Why should I preach? So it's at the end of the day, it still boils down to being aware of the knowledge and walking the talk in small steps, simple baby steps.
Thanks, Navinder. Deva, can I have your insights as well?
Sure. The way I see it is, see, it all comes down to one particular point where, when it comes to human beings, it's the nature of them. See, we have something called the willpower, which other beings, they don't have. So we tend to make decisions which may not be right. So that's a very important point to consider. That's what separates us from the animals, right? See, you see all the rest of the creatures, they follow a particular order. But we human beings, we are different. Our decisions are swayed by our likes and dislikes. And that is why diversity or the appreciation of different things around our life, sometimes we don't really look at it, we don't really accept it, because we are already swayed by like and dislike in that manner. So it takes, I think fundamentally it's all about how you're educated, how knowledge is passed to you, what's the teaching tradition like. So this is where religion plays a very important part, especially because from young, when you are trained to accept everyone as equally as a human being, then I think diversity will be a possible thing in the entire world. Thank you.
Thanks, Deba. Let's hear from Gwat and then Imran, your perspectives of the gap.
Okay, can I just sort of backtrack about beginnings? All right, some of your faiths, you grew up in the faiths. In Christianity, I'm a convert, okay, from an atheist, non-believing background, and some of the things I think I brought with me was the fact that I follow authority. And it's of interest to me to obey authority. So when I come into the faith, for me, authority is important, authority of the text, authority of the leaders, and what they actually tell you. So in some ways, leaders do set the example for us to, whether we embrace diversity in its fullest sense or only at a limited sense. Within, say, for example, I came from a Protestant background, and then at a later stage, I became confirmed as a Catholic. For some, it's very unusual and might find it very strange, because even within the Protestant Christian community and the Catholic community, they are not as friendly as we would like them to be, as you know. And sometimes my friend looked at me and like, why did you change faith? Even though we were worshiping the same God. And they asked me, why in the Catholic faith you're worshiping idols? So there's diversity even within their own religious community, all right? And what I found was what baggage or emotions and stuff that we bring in is what actually carries on with us. Unless we can unload and heal all this baggage, we would be looking for the things that fulfill our needs. And so my journey has been strange, because from being a Protestant Christian, an experience in the Holy Land caused me to be more interfaith, which means I began to engage with Christians and Jews and people of other faiths. And I think one of you spoke about, when you spoke about the experience and seeing that, well, the blessings are also for everyone else. And looking at the similarities in the text, and of course their difference. And so now the issue is not about living with the similarities, but living with the difference. And the idea that my faith is the only path to a certain destination. And for me, it took me a long while. And sometimes I'm still wrestling with it, especially when I go to religious places where there are statues, deities, gods. It's like part of my old baggage that I'm still working through that. And to actually be comfortable in my own skin takes time. The other thing also is the need for your own introspection, because normally it's easy just to follow instructions. It's so easy. If I give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you follow these instructions, this is going to get to where you are. But I think in the Catholic tradition, it's more about as in the Christian tradition, to actually practice is important, all right? And how one of the things would be to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul, but to love your neighbor as yourself, your Hindu neighbor, your Muslim neighbor, your atheist neighbor, your LGBTQ neighbor. And I think that's the tough part. And so there has to be a change, and there has to be a conversion. And I think this is the whole journey of our life. And the other thing I've learned also is that meeting with people of different faiths challenge my assumptions, challenge me into the deepest of what I believe in. And for some people, it's very fearful, so you withdraw and you build higher walls. But because I had spent a lot of time, 10 weeks in Israel and West Bank and the Gaza Strip, I was brought into a place where I really had to ponder about what about the Abrahamic traditions and what about the other people? And whether I believed in what they believed in, I began to engage and relate to people. And so it's, as Nell was saying, you begin to relate to people, you begin to see different things, and allowing that to happen is really helpful, especially with teachers, YKid and people like that, and also with religious leaders. So actually one of my dreams was actually to have a retreat center in which the religious leaders could actually come together in a retreat house to retreat together and eat the different kinds of food, whether it's halal, whether it's kosher, whether it's vegetarian, but begin to be in an environment that is different from.
I just want to maybe throw a spanner here a bit and maybe question whether the real issue or tension is between the ideals and the reality. Because we also have to accept the fact that whose ideals are we talking about? There are different ideals within each religious communities and also across the religious communities. We cannot assume that everyone values diversity, even within a particular faith, right? So there are different theologies, and some of these theologies may be very deeply exclusivist in the sense that they see diversity, even though it's natural, but it's something to be dominated, to be erased. And therefore, everyone must eventually adhere to a single way of believing, and that happens to be theirs. But there's also theologies that are very inclusive, as well as even pluralist in the sense of not just acknowledging diversity, but embracing diversity itself and saying that we need not eliminate these differences amongst us. In fact, we should actively embrace it and learn from each other. And eventually it will also shape us in ways and forms that we might be surprised ourselves. And therefore the tension is really on whether we are exclusivist in our worldview, in our adherence to our faith, or we are a bit more inclusive, or we are even pluralist. Of course, amongst those who pay lip service to the value of diversity, then yes, there is a tension and there's a divergence with some of the realities that we see. And that's where I do totally agree with some of you who had said that, we must not just preach about diversity, but we actually have to walk the talk, right? But here human beings are human beings. We will always think very highly of ourselves, and therefore the problem is not us. The problem is always other people. We've been walking the talk, right? But other people have not been walking the talk. So I think we need to bring the conversation up a notch and recognize that something else is missing in the conversation about these tensions between ideals and reality. And it's got to do with several factors. Number one, I would think that this tendency for human beings to create in-groups and out-groups, which eventually determines who's part of us and who's not. The us and them, which can easily slide down into us versus them when you have a lot of other configurations and factors such as competition for resources, for power, for influence, for domination, etc. Right? The second factor that we have to bear in mind is once we have this in-group and out-group, then the tendency is for us to create hierarchies. So we may talk about dialogues, interfaith dialogues, talking with each other, even sitting at the same table. But if we do not recognize this inherent bias in us to see things in hierarchical forms, that I am better than the other person, even though I'm sitting at the same table and eating the same food, then there is a potential problem there, right? But of course, naturally, not everything is equal because we do acknowledge that some things are better than others, right? This is where the third factor comes in. Even as we acknowledge that some things are better than others, what is our state of mind in dealing with this? Is it through the perspective of arrogance, for example, or through the perspective of humility, where we recognize that we may believe in a certain thing at this point in time, but we do not have the absolute truth. And it opens us to learning from other faith traditions, from other philosophical ways of thinking. If we do not have that, then we are saying essentially that there is nothing to learn. And this is where we adopt the arrogance. And I will put here within the Islamic tradition, the interesting story of how the devil himself, Iblis, refused to bow down before Adam when he was created, even though God commanded all the angels to bow down before Adam, but Iblis or the devil refused. And what is his reason? He says, I'm made from fire, he's made from clay or mud, and therefore I'm better than him. So the moment we are arrogant about our status and our own group, then we are actually displaying the same tendency that has gotten the devil out of the sphere of God's grace and mercy.
All right. Thank you, Imran and Guad, for your perspectives as well. Now, it's great that we are looking at different perspectives, and we are also challenging a lot of these assumptions that we are having.